Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for staying with us. I know we're getting towards the tail end of the day. I invite my panel to come and sit down. Wherever you like.
Respective faces.
For those that don't know me, I'm Tunnah, formerly with Pharma, Healthware, and then Pharma. Now an independent consultant, so available for projects, events, weddings, birthday parties, where's the right? Whatever you need. We're going to switch tack a little bit. We're going to move away from medical, which means we can talk about sales and ROI and products, whatever we like, unabashed. But we're going to talk about AI in the context of insights. I know we've got 20 minutes for this. We're going to be quick fire. This is how we're doing this. And I want to keep this really practical because we hear a lot about the potential for AI, what it can do. I hope we can hear a little bit about what it actually is doing as part of this panel. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves so we get the introductions correct. We're going to work our way down the line. So let's start with an introduction, but also I'd love to hear where you're practically using AI to generate new insights or quicker insights, how it's transforming that insights process. Jaime, let's go to you first.
Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm actually surprised that there are still people here.
It's good, thank you.
That is commitment. Well, I'm Jaime Manzanera, brand director at Eisai for the EMEA region, heading the strategy for GU cancers. That's one of the hats, but in small companies we usually have two hats, and so over on that I have another one heading the strategy for Omnichannel for the Oncology business unit. So answering the second question, we're kind of exploring the use of avatars. There was a presentation this morning about the topic. And I think that there is a huge potential on avatars to train our field teams. And it's something that we really think we need to explore further. Also, how to use them to put key messages out there on the digital channels, working with different KOLs and supporting the countries to use those avatars. And finally, coaching. I think that is something an area to explore as well a lot because with AI we can really coach and really get a record of the calls of our camps and helping them to really improve their communication and their engagement with doctors. So I think those are the areas where I think we are trying to explore the benefits of AI.
That's great. That really bridges the hot topic we had earlier of like, is it human, digital, or a combination of both? I think the examples there illustrate how you get that feedback with both. So Lance, you gave a great presentation earlier about the process of insights generation from AI, how it can be used, where it can be used. Again, reintroduce yourself to those people that didn't see that, but also where you're seeing this have the most impact.
Sure. So I'm Lance Hill. I'm the CEO and founder of Within3. Within3 is a technology company in the life sciences space. We work globally, and we have solutions to really help organizations gather insights and knowledge from customers, and then to do analytics from the physician or HCP level all the way up to the market level. And earlier, that's where I talk about. We do most of our work at kind of that market level of analytics and leave some of the deeper HCP things to CRM type of work.
And you obviously do lots of diverse projects. Any particular area where you're seeing the most impact from this? We look within Pharma.
What's really interesting, I think it builds on some of the presentations that we were talking about earlier, is because this idea that we have all this data and it's spread out and no one human can possibly work with it. As you bring it together, I think it's really putting a spotlight on kind of strategy. And back to the earlier presentation, not measuring activities, but measuring impact, because you now have a set of data you can use to inspect, to determine that impact and see how it's changing over time. And so I think there's a lot of amazing work happening on disparate data sets and how to bring them together and algorithms to weight them and understand them and those sorts of things, which is the techie part. But I think there's really good ways that it frees up all of us to focus on business and strategy and outcomes and not focus on administrative burden.
And I'll come back to that strategy piece, because I think that's really interesting. But Christian, please introduce yourself. And again, if you can talk about how you're practically using AI in the insight space.
Yeah, sure. Christian Schulze, my name, happy to be here as well. And I feel a little bit like I might have a similar role in Lundbeck, not being a CEO, but still trying to make sense out of all of that data and feeding that into strategic processes. So my team is actually building out platform capabilities, as we call them. That is basically frameworks, it's processes, it's a technology, everything that's related to CM, MarTech, advanced analytics, and reporting that enables basically our affiliates around the world to make these omnichannel kind of engagements really fruitful. So it's similar to what you have just said, but we start, of course, very close to the field. That means that we are very operational in the first sense in terms of producing insights, not that relevant for strategy yet. But one of the use cases might be just, and this is something we heard now, I think, tons of times, right? If you accumulate all of the data from customer level, if you build these customer 360 profiles across the functions, so across marketing, across medical, across sales, basically, right? That enables you with all of the data that you have internally, but also externally, to produce a lot of just very simple insights like what are your preferences, what is the channels you use, what is the content you use, how do you resonate towards certain tonalities of content and so on. So this is a very foundational use case, and it's of course very, very powerful as well. But we can use that then to further advance it. You can mix it then with sales data, prescription data, whatever is available across the planet, to then generate something like a value index, for instance, so that you really understand what is the contribution of any given customer to your overarching sales, basically. Or you can use it where you have the data at hand, like in Canada, in the US, Brazil, actually even predict on a HCP level, what is the prescription look like basically next fall or next month. So there's insights on various levels that are actually helping us to drive operational excellence to a certain extent, from the sales excellence perspective, but also from the marketing excellence perspective. And that all is supposed to feed up into brand strategy, which we are not yet here, at least in Lundbeck. So it's great to hear what you out as well, to see how that is.
And thank you all for being so open about what you're doing. I know it's not always easy to share in too much detail. Just one little bit you mentioned there, Christine, around sharing data across functions, particularly medical and commercial. Perhaps goes beyond the AI topic, but that I think is so important. I still don't necessarily always see companies able to do that and get that single view of truth. Let's talk about the strategy piece, because we know traditionally the process has been you generate lots of insight, you do all your research, your primary, your secondary, you pour through that, you build your strategy, and off you go. And the strategy really doesn't get touched too much or very infrequently after that. It doesn't have to be that way now that we can get these more instant insights. So Lance, I'm going to come to you. How is this changing the way you see companies doing their strategy or refining their strategy?
So you have, one of the things that I think is common when you're working in a strategy environment and you don't have an outside tool that doesn't kind of have your bias and momentum in terms of what it's thinking, is a lot of times you don't see things that are different or unexpected, or if you do, they can be discounted. And so the lag between seeing something unexpected, realizing and doing something about it can be longer. With technology tools, it's looking at the data in a more objective way. It still requires a human to validate the conclusions, don't get me wrong, but it's looking at things in a more objective way, and the changes can come faster, and you can trace where something different came from quite immediately. So your ability to be very agile, to say we're starting to see this thing is starting to happen in this region. We're seeing our competitors are in the market. We're starting to see this change in thinking happening that is not correct. You can see those things much faster, and because you're not spending so much time kind of searching, managing, building, reporting, and all of those things, I feel like it frees people up to just focus on that versus the activity of insights, if that makes sense.
Which is really important, because there's a wealth of data that says the first 6 to 12 months of like a new brand launch is going to dictate its success. So if you're going to shift something, you want to shift it early. Do you see recognition of that, and do you see companies really starting to lean into that?
We do. Different types of data have different levels of frequency to them. So obviously social listening data is updated and on a real-time basis, on a daily basis, things are changing. If you're looking at, our strategy is, ATU studies every 6 months to determine what people think. That's a different kind of level of how long it takes before you discover something new. Maybe something in the middle is, I'm doing some advisory boards in between congresses or what have you. And so I think understanding what are all the source information I have that can help educate me on what's happening in the market, and then how quickly those give me leading indicators is what a technology can do, is help bring that all together. Yeah.
So, Jaime, Kristen, I don't know if you want to comment on this further and share obviously what you're comfortable with, but are you seeing brand teams become a little bit dynamic with their strategy, or more dynamic with their strategy?
Well, to be honest, actually, we've been discussing this topic a lot these 2 days, but I would have loved to have access to those systems like the one that you have presented this morning for the latest launch that I did, because to be honest, that will speed up the process. You have access to that information before you launch. Of course, we will address those issues even earlier. We know that the window time that we have to successfully launch any product in the market or any new indication in the market is getting shorter and shorter. So the sooner that you get access to those insights, the better for us to really action on them. So I think that the answer to your question is if we really are able to ensure that we get access to those solutions, that the solutions are able to break the silos at the same time and continue to bring more powerful insights, probably the answer to your question is yes. We will see a shift and we will see how we are able to deliver even quicker strategies.
And what about you, Christian? Because it's logical to adjust your strategy if there's new data and new insights, but it's quite hard when you've got your 200-slide PowerPoint deck with your beautiful strategy you developed for launch and senior management has rubber stamped it. Do you see people willing to embrace some of that change?
Yeah, I mean, it's related to what was just said. I think it's you have to take a look at where we can currently produce these kind of insights, right? And like I said before, we are a lot of these insights we are producing is engagement driven, right? So there's of course also the possibility to track a customer across, for instance, brand adoption. Plus, we can also track content, like I said before, the key messaging, right? So with the advanced analytics capabilities that we have, that can actually inform brand strategy, and we can actually take a look at customer groups, at how they have been messaged, engaged with, and so on, and can see if actually the objectives from the strategy perspective are being reached. But this is only kind of engagement triggered, and this is not social media, this is not ATU, it's not market research. So I think the insight generation process across the different kind of classical functions, so to speak, they change, or they have changed with the new possibilities that we have. With us, for Omnichannel, when it comes to engagement, it's maybe a better word for customer engagement across the different functions. This is, of course, already feeding into the brand strategy process, right? But again, we all know we are humans, we have big processes. The companies I have worked for, they all have annual brand planning processes, even if they have been completely integrated, right? It takes time to do market research, it takes time to revisit the strategy, to think about what comes next and so on. So it's mostly an annual process. And now with the information that we have, we actually trigger the need to discuss certain things earlier, but it does not have yet completely changed the process. So that is something that is really a bit more difficult to achieve. I'm not sure how you see that, but
yeah, no, I agree. I think the first is kind of understanding what's possible, and then kind of understanding what does that mean for the real humans involved. And for me, the biggest problem with AI is just too much AI. Like, there's so many different ways to think about AI, different processes people are using, and the term gets mixed, and the problems are kind of the same but kind of not, and it's just too much. And I think that is almost paralyzing in a way. The promise of the technology is so broad, and the accessibility is so low, like it's so easy to access it, that it's almost paralyzing. And I think what will happen over the next 1, 2, 3 years is it will really crystallize in certain parts of our business kind of best practices around using this sort of approach to achieve certain things. And I think that the human and the organizational skills and uplift, which I didn't talk about during my pitch, but is critical, also then becomes easier because you're working with something that's concrete, that you can kind of see and touch what it's doing, what the outputs are, versus conceptual, which can be difficult for people to get their minds around.
And balancing what's practical, because a dynamic brand plan is one thing, but if you're changing it every week, it's probably not going to be
effectively your plan. I would call it a plan, I guess.
Exactly.
It's
chaos.
Yes.
You talked about the human factor now, and I wanted just to spend a few minutes talking about that human factor, because we've had some really good conversation today about change management, and that you can't just take a new tech and just stick it into a company and hope it's going to work. As things like AI comes in different areas, people's roles will change, the structures will change, skills will change. And I'm looking at the guys sitting within pharma companies here, just to get some insight around what you're seeing in that space. Jaime?
I don't think that there will be a replacement, clearly not, but I think that this is more about upskilling people, right? I think that people will completely change the way how they work. I think that AI tools have a right to free up time. We've been discussing today things that we don't really like follow-up emails, summary emails from the meetings, those kind of simple tasks that are very repetitive and they don't add any value. I think that that's where I see these AI tools coming quickly to really help us to improve our efficiency and to become more efficient. Going further, well, we will see. I think that it depends on the area where we work. If we think of a clinical development or in the discovery phase, of course, I think that AI will be completely integrated. The way how we develop new medicines clearly will change.
Don't think we're out of time. Just a bit of burst of music there.
I thought he was saying something so meaningful, we're going to burst into song.
Exactly. That sounds like time, guys. Let's go.
Just to finish, but I think that in other areas, like in commercial, well, the shift probably will not be as big as in other areas.
So new skills and opportunity, not really a threat. Christian?
Yeah, I mean, we now have data scientists, right? So at least, decade before they didn't exist. Now we have data engineers. We have so much more in terms of data visualization and so on. We didn't have before, and also I think I fully agree to local, to affiliates, it frees up time, so they can really focus on customer engagement and customer experience. But when it comes to HQ, so I think there's a lot of changes, right? Centralization of things, was just that one, right? But just brand managers being able to do more than just this 1 year of strategic thinking and so on, but really looking at how actually whatever they produce in terms of content that hopefully is used locally is then having an impact on what they want to achieve. So they have to revise maybe their engagement plans or content production on a more quarterly basis, monthly basis. I don't know. So I think that a lot from a HQ perspective at least will change, or has to change.
And just before we wrap up, because we're lasting a couple of minutes, Lance, working within three, I can say this, working within three over time, have you seen your clients evolve in the time that you've been operating in that sense?
Definitely, yes. I think there was a mode where AI, outside of those who had been involved in kind of predictive AI for a long time, outside of that crowd, was very scary and unknown, and the headlines were very scary and unknown, and there'd be these kind of big vision-y presentations like, oh, we're gonna, in 10 years, do this or do that, and it's all gonna be wonderful and magical. And I think what's happened since is people are getting exposure to AI in different ways, it's really helping. I think on the last panel, Emma was saying people have exposure like Copilot and their personal productivity. You mentioned coaching and training review, so you get exposed to it for different processes, and then it makes it easier to understand how it might work in a new process. And I think that's happening. And I also think I don't think a couple years ago I talked to people and there was a question whether or not it was like going to stick. Almost like is this really going to happen or not? And now, obviously, I think everyone realizes it's not a question if it's going to happen. It's a question of is it going to happen? Are you going to lead it, or is it going to happen to you? Is maybe the question.
So quick final wrap-up thoughts then. We're going to look ahead with our crystal ball as to where this journey is going to take us. And as we chatted about before, no one's going to cross-check you on this in 5 years' time. So 20-second answers. What's going to be the biggest change you think we'll see in 5 years' time as AI comes into the insight space? Jaime?
I really wonder how many new companies will come and how many companies that we currently see offering AI tools will still be alive. That's something that is inevitable to think of. That's the first one. And the second question that I really have, do we expect new regulation coming out from politicians? In Europe we have the first law regulating the way how AI should operate. So I don't know if there will be new regulation limiting or offering new ways of working.
Thank you, Lance.
I think in the next 5 years that data foundation layer is going to get solved. And so it's going to be a lot more innovation on kind of the analytics and what you can do with it layer, as opposed to right now it's heavy sledding for a lot of companies to try to get the data together in the first place.
Thank you. Christian, I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to say in 5 years, right? So normally we underestimate basically the long-term impact of it. Is 5 years long-term for AI? We see so many changes now. I don't know.
There'll be
right?
3 new versions of it.
Yeah, exactly. So we will talk to ourselves in the morning with an agent, maybe explaining yourself what to do with it. I don't know. But I think looking at what we can see in terms of AI insights generation, that will help us to do so many more things in terms of, like I said before, pro-content engagement production, which then hopefully will also be solved by something around the LMR process, because this is right now a huge bottleneck to really liberate all of what is happening with AI. So hopefully that will be solved in 5 years' time.
Thank you very much, guys. Do come and speak to them if you have questions for them. They'll be around. But thanks, guys, and thank you to all of you for listening.